Fusion Mobile, quality e-learning experience on the go.
Welcome to Fusion Mobile e-learning platform. My name is OK Bono. The subject before us is agricultural science, and the topic we are considering at this moment is irrigation and drainage. Irrigation and drainage. Irrigation is the opposite of drainage. Drainage is the opposite of irrigation. I think that's a better way to put it. So they are just word and opposite. Irrigation talks about adding on of water to the surface of the soil artificially, artificially adding water, artificially introducing water to the surface of the soil, to make up for the shortage in rainfall. Irrigation is the artificial introduction of water to the surface of the farmland to supplement for the insufficient rainfall. So irrigation is usually carried out either in the dry season or in areas where rainfall is insufficient, and a few factors may be considered during this process of irrigation: the type of farmland, that is the type of soil on the farmland, the size of the farm, and the topography of the area. You don't want to, irrigation has to be done in such a way that the water does not log within the farm. So there has to be some gentle slope, that takes the water, that runs the water off the surface of the farmland as in case it is in excess. And of course, irrigation, drainage is the other way around, where you artificially remove excess water from the surface of the farmland. Now, talking about irrigation, we have about 3 types of irrigation. Well, before we go on to look at the types of irrigation, let us quickly consider the few economic importance of irrigation in the farm. When we talk about irrigation, we are also talking about the possibility of making the crops that are irrigated able to be produced round the year. For instance, maize. Maize is usually produced at about within the rainy season, but we discover that irrigation can assist or can help the maize to be produced up to 3 times a year. I mean, the maize keeps on growing as long as it has enough water, so crops are produced all year round. Irrigation also helps to soften the ground. It helps to soften the ground. It helps to make the ground tillable. It helps to make nutrients easily absorbable, easily absorbed, into the roots by the roots of the crops. And furthermore, irrigation also assists in diluting the salts or salts or mineral salts that are, so to say, of high concentration on the surface of the soil. So it dissolves them and carries them, down away and leaves the top of the soil a bit rather dilute, or a bit rather for the plants, and for the plants to absorb the necessary or the right amount of nutrients. Yes. Irrigation also helps to control the temperature of the soil. Anyway, one little bit of thing: irrigation can also encourage the growth of microbes, the growth of undesirable organisms, the growth of weeds on the farm. So to be able to check that, or to be able to keep that in check, you may want to use certain chemicals, and you may want to employ certain methods that will reduce the growth of weeds and the spread of diseases and growth of unwanted microbes within the farm while irrigating. Right now, we will take a look at the irrigation systems. I mentioned that there are 3 of them, and you can see them here on the board. The surface irrigation, subsurface irrigation, and overhead irrigation. The overhead irrigation is further subdivided into 2. We have the sprinkler irrigation and we have the drip irrigation. Then we will go on to look at the advantages and disadvantages. Okay, this helps us to compare both. This helps us to compare the different systems of irrigation. Talking about the surface irrigation. Surface irrigation requires constructions of channels, okay, from streams or from lakes, from ponds. You construct channels along the paths. Channels are constructed on the farmland or across the farmland, okay, from dams, from streams, from ponds, and the farm where you have the dams, the ponds, the lakes, okay, they are usually at a little bit of elevated grounds, okay, and then the farmland itself is rather a little slopey. This helps the water to run over the surface of the farmland without accumulating on the farmland. So the water runs from these through these channels from the dams and lakes across the farmland and irrigates the land. Okay. Now you see that this method assists because it is usually done on a little bit of slopy ground. You discover that excess water is usually removes excess water from the surface of the farmland, and also it assists. It's easy to construct, very easy. Okay, you just locate a dam, for instance, or a stream just nearby, or you can even construct one and then just construct channels across the surface of the farmland where the waters will run through to irrigate the farmland. Now, it also increases microbial activity. Microbial activity is good for the soil, okay? It helps the soil to aerate the soil and also introduces some nutrients to the soil. Now, such type of irrigation increases microbial activity. However, one of the disadvantages is that when there is a lot of flood, I'm sorry, it could be difficult to control on the farmland. Now, if this ground is too hilly, okay, you know what we mean by hilly? Not slopey, hilly. That is, the hill is the slope is rather too sharp. Water cannot be retained on the soil to irrigate the soil. It just runs fiam and leaves. Also, if the sand there is sandy, if the soil there is sandy, the water cannot, the soil cannot hold enough water to irrigate the soils. And also, it is important to note that the channels that are constructed across the farmland may make it difficult for farm machinery to be carried or to run across the surface of the farmland. Now, talking about subsurface irrigation. Subsurface irrigation makes use of channels or pipes that are run beneath the surface of the soil, and these pipes are punctured at various points or intervals, and then water is run through the pipes below the surface of the ground, and you discover that by so doing the water does not flood the surface of the ground, and it is usually regulated such that the soils or the roots of the plants get just the right amount of water that they need. Now, subsurface irrigation, again, recall or remember, subsurface irrigation runs in subsurface irrigation, pipes are run beneath the surface of the soil, and these pipes are punctured at various intervals where water can come out from and irrigate the soil. Now, there is efficiency in the use of water, low evaporation losses because the waters come out, okay, not on the surface but beneath the surface, so evaporation is not very high, okay, and then no obstructions or obstacles because the pipes are run beneath the surface of the ground. Farm machinery can be carried around, without any obstruction whatsoever. However, this method is expensive. You have to note that. It requires expertise, and salty water cannot be used. Salty water cannot be used because the water goes directly to the roots of the plants. So salty water will be injurious to the plants. And then overhead irrigation, which is the third, we have divided that into sprinkler irrigation and drip irrigation. Sprinkler irrigation also uses pipes. However, these pipes are not run beneath the surface of the ground. They are run on the surface of the ground, and water is run using pressure through the pipes. And you would have seen this surface irrigation on some grass, on some lawns and grasslands. Lagos State government uses that quite often or quite a lot. When you walk through some lawns, you see water jetting out, okay, from at different intervals along pipes that are run across the surface, or along some points that run across the surface of that grassland or the farmland. That's how it works. Okay, so we said sprinkler irrigation is the first type of irrigation when we consider overhead irrigation. Overhead irrigation, once again, talks about irrigation that is happening above the surface of the soil, and the sprinkler irrigation is conducted through pipes or channels, okay, and the water spreads on top of the leaves of these plants, thereby reducing evapotranspiration. Transpiration is the loss of water through the leaves of the plants. So evaporation due to transpiration is greatly reduced using sprinkler irrigation, okay, because the leaves continuously get watered by the irrigation. And of course, you can actually use fertilizers and herbicides along with the irrigation. That is, you can apply soluble fertilizers and herbicides into the irrigation water, so that as the water is jetting out under pressure from the pipes and the hose along the pipes, the herbicides and fertilizers are also going along with it and helping to enhance the soil fertility. And of course, as your guess may be, it is costly. Yes, it is costly. And wind may be a hindrance. If the wind is heavy, the water may not go where you want it to go. So the wind will be beating the water off their course. And of course, to be able to carry out this type of irrigation system, you need stable power supply and you need constant water supply. Okay, drip irrigation is different from sprinkler irrigation in the sense that the drip irrigation concentrates its water. It concentrates its water outlet at the roots of the plants, not on the leaves, not on top of the plant. It doesn't go like pia, 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 pia. No, it goes under low pressure. The sprinkler irrigation has more pressure or uses more pressure than the drip irrigation. The drip irrigation is of less pressure, so it just takes its water, it just directs its water to the roots of the plants and not the leaves, okay? And that way it operates with lower pressure and also reduces salt concentration at the root zone of the plants. Now, you may also want to note that here the drip irrigation and the sprinkler irrigation share the same advantages, okay? They share basically the same advantages because the amount of water is also regulated in drip irrigation. You can also use the herbicides and the fertilizers along with the irrigation. Furthermore, in the disadvantages, water with high salt concentration cannot be used. Water with high salt concentration cannot be used. Of course, you should know because it goes straight to the roots of the plant. So if the water with high salt concentration is used, definitely it will affect the plants adversely. Now we will quickly look at drainage. However, before that, let's talk about a few problems that may be associated with irrigation systems. Now, if you talk about irrigation, if you want to irrigate your farm, there are a few cautions, a few things you must take note of, because when water is constantly available on the farmland, that is across the surface of the farmland, you're going to have to deal more with weeds. You're going to have to deal more with microorganisms, with different microorganisms, and you're going to have to deal more with a lot of unwanted pests and diseases, okay? Now, these are some of the challenges that you may be facing when you have irrigation all year round in your farm. Now, a little bit away from that, it's good to know that irrigation systems are very expensive to run. Irrigation is expensive and the equipment are not easily found. So, of course, that makes it all the more expensive, and you may also have to deal with vectors like snails and etc. flies. You have to deal with these things, okay? Because they will always be there. They thrive where there is water. And you will also have to deal with the fact that a lot of technical know-how and expertise is required when you're handling irrigation systems. Now, these are some of the challenges, but that doesn't mean you cannot do irrigation. All you have to do is take the necessary measures. For instance, in terms of pests and diseases, you know what to do. Get the necessary herbicides and pesticides. In terms of weed, you do the right weed control, rotational cropping and all of that. I mean, here and there, you take care of a few things. Then talking about a nursery, for instance. In the nursery for the little plants that are just springing up, you may not want to use a lot of water to irrigate the farmland. You can use watering can, okay? Watering can is just handy. You can use broom to sprinkle water from bucket. You can use brush to sprinkle water from bucket. But basically, watering can will be fine for the nursery, okay? So in that case, you don't need all these sophisticated processes to get your farmland or the nursery irrigated, okay? Now we will look at drainage system. Drainage just like we explained earlier, is just the opposite of irrigation. Okay, irrigation, you're introducing water onto the farmland. Drainage, you are withdrawing water from the farmland. So drainage is the artificial withdrawal of excess water from the farmland to make way for better farming activities, So in drainage, or by practicing drainage, you make more space available for farming, you make the land more tillable, and of course you make it light by, these are some of the facts about drainage. The land becomes more available for farming, and of course enough air enters the land. When there's no more water covering, you discover that enough air enters the land, the temperature of the land is regulated, the microbial activities are also at optimum, because just the right amount of moisture is retained in the land. Of course, you're not withdrawing the water completely such that it becomes sun-dried. No, you must leave some amount of water that will enable good farming activities, microbial activities, for nutrients, for the right amount of nutrients to be retained in the soil, and of course acidity, salinity, and all the other negative things that may affect the farmland by withdrawing this water also goes with the excess water that has been withdrawn. So there is enough space for farming, there is a good level of temperature regulation, microbial activity, good available, the land becomes more available for tilling and more easy and lighter to till, okay? And quite a number of advantages around drainage, okay? Of course, the growth of unwanted diseases and pests are also reduced by withdrawing excess water from the farmland. So you can take a look at the situation and get to know all the possibilities around drainage. There are a whole lot of them that you can name. Now, there are two basic types of drainage systems. The first one is the surface drainage, and the second is the subsurface or underground drainage, just like we explained in the case of the irrigation. Okay, in the case of irrigation, we had the surface irrigation, we had the subsurface or the underground irrigation, and then we had the overhead irrigation, which was split into two. Remember, the sprinkler and the drip. Now, in this case, it's just about the same thing. We have the surface drainage. The same way channels were constructed from dams to irrigate the farmland. The same way channels are constructed away from the farmlands into dams, okay, into places where the water can be drained into. Do you see the difference? So one is just the opposite of the other. It's as simple as that. So now surface drainage is cheap to construct. But in the long run, it might just be something like penny wise, pound foolish, because it has quite a number of disadvantages. You can see when you construct channels here and there across the farmland, you occupy planting space. The space that could have been used for planting will be occupied by ditches and channels and drainages running across the farmland space here and there. So you may not want to go that route. You may want to consider the second one. But let's also see, farm machinery cannot move around effectively because there are ditches and channels everywhere. So you have a lot of encumbrances, and also erosion and hazards are very more likely, because when you have all these ditches and channels here and there, when the rains come, it can burrow deeper into the channels and ditches and cause gully erosions everywhere in your farm, and you might just have to pack and run away. But you don't want to do that. So you may want to consider surface or underground irrigation. In this case, the surface or underground drainage. You see, I'm kind of using the same term. That's because they are quite related. One is just the opposite of the other. In this case, the pipes are run underground. Of course, you first of all make those trenches, you run the pipes across, and then you hammer the earth back to place. So no, there's really no there's no harm in what you've done. The only thing here is that the pipes underground have holes, so that as the water falls and goes through the earth, the pipes collect the water and then run the water away from the farmland. Very simple. You don't get to see trenches, you don't get to see holes, you don't get to see ditches. Everywhere is neat and tidied up. And of course, the farm machineries can move around. There's a lot of space for planting, and you know, the efficiency is just wonderful. Okay? Then, the disadvantages, of course. You can't eat your cake and have it. So if you want good meal, you've got to spend good money. So it's expensive to run, it's expensive to maintain, it's difficult to construct. But the rewards are far greater than you would have in the surface drainage. And this brings us to the end of our irrigation and drainage in this session of in this very session. Okay. We've looked at irrigation, we've looked at drainage, we've looked at the various types of irrigation and various types of drainage. We've looked at their advantages and disadvantages. A few questions will pop up on your screen very soon. Please do well to attempt them, and feel free to run the video over and over again.